So this is the group that made the hard decision, a little more education before food. So I'm gonna try to do my job and give you guys a lot of practical information that you can utilize immediately. Now, if you ever heard me before, I'm sorry, but I try to squeeze a lot in a short amount of time, so I just wanna get into it. So first, of course, I want to thank Chris and the entire Perform Better group. Guys, we don't have this wonderful opportunity to share and exchange ideas without them. So I hope that you both thank the entire staff, but also support them whenever possible so we can keep having these events and great opportunities. I also want to thank all of you for coming. You guys are a big part of raising the standard of our industry, and I really mean that. Because I don't think I'm being dramatic when I'm saying we're kind of at this big, important crossroads in our industry. I hear people all the time going, we need to dumb things down. Listen, I'm all for not making things overly complex. But a lot of the things that our clients are dealing with are challenging, and they do have some complexity to them. So I like to use this quote from my good friend, Dr. Brian Schilling. He's an amazing researcher in our industry. He's done some landmark studies. He goes, instead of dumbing things down, why don't we raise people up? So I hope by giving you guys some details and some new information, you guys are going to be able to go back and lift up your clients higher than you thought you could. So Chris already introduced me, but I just want you guys briefly to introduce myself as well, because I know some of you don't know me. You're lucky. I have been in this industry for about 30 years now, which dates me, and you can guess kind of what my age is. For over 10 of those years, I did run my own personal training studio, so I know what it's like to be a business owner. I know what it's like to train a wide array of different populations. For the past 17 years, I've predominantly been traveling the world, being a consultant. I work with everybody from sports performance programs to health and wellness programs in hospital settings, fitness, personal training studios. We've done physical therapy clinics, everything in between, even elite military work. So I want to tell you that because I want you to have confidence, number one, that I'm reliable, but number two, no matter who you're working with, this information is going to be relevant to you. So why do corrective exercise in the first place? I know for myself, when I got into corrective exercise in the late 90s, I did because a lot of my clients would come in, they'd have these big, lofty fitness goals, but guess what? Their shoulder hurt, their back hurt, their neck hurt, their knee hurt. And so it was hard to train consistently. It was hard to train with an intensity that would actually get them to their fitness goals. So it made a lot of sense on its face. If we do these exercises and improve how they function, then they'll have less pain and they can train more consistently and we'll get those results that we want. Unfortunately, what I learned was that really didn't work out how I thought. And when you look at the research often will separate pain and function. Sometimes they're related, but not as closely as we may think. So you may have clients that can do more things, but their pain's not getting better, which makes it harder to actually get them to their goals. So what is the definition of corrective exercise? What does it mean? So I pulled these definitions from some big national organizations in our industry. And they have lots of great ideas, right? Fixing muscle imbalances, fixing movement compensations, improving movement efficiency. All those things are really great, right? Those are good goals to have. But do you notice one thing missing from all three? There's no mention of reducing pain. So sometimes the problem with corrective exercise is our expectation of what we're actually trying to achieve. Sometimes we'll improve function and will sometimes help pain, but not as much as we often think because we don't understand pain very well. This is also about any type of fitness goal you have, especially if you're talking about fat loss. When we're talking corrective exercise, we're still talking about fat loss. Because I know a lot of your clients come to you, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds, but by the way, my knees are killing me. And people go, why don't people just work out then? Well, a study over 2 years followed people that did have chronic pain and those that did not. And they found those that did have chronic pain lost 33% less weight than those that did not have pain. Now that probably makes a lot of sense because what they found was the predominant reason was people with chronic pain had a hard time implementing lifestyle strategies or behavioral changes because chronic pain is chronic stress. So it makes sense. If we want to lose body fat, if we want to improve fitness, we do have to also address the physical pain. And so I don't think people understand the complexity of pain. If you go through any type of orthopedic surgery, you have almost a 25% chance of having PTSD symptoms afterwards. Surgery is very, very stressful. And a lot of people never get told that. And then they wonder why they have more pain after their surgery or why things are actually even more difficult. They're like, I thought the surgery was to fix me. So there's a lot of times we just misunderstand what things are for. Like your clicker. There we go. I don't want to get stuck and I'll give you guys a lot of stats because I'm guessing if I ask how many people in this room either have chronic aches and pains or work with people with chronic aches and pains, I'm going to guess every arm is going to go up in the room. So we know it's very prevalent, but we don't actually have good solutions for it, which is kind of the bothersome part. So what do we end up doing? We go to social media, we're like, I gotta find out, I gotta help my client, they have these issues, what I'm gonna do? And I'm not gonna be the old guy up here saying, don't go on social media, you're gonna go on social media, and that's fine. There is good information on there, it's just really hard to tell you what it is. Because when research looks at the quality of evidence people online give, it's generally pretty poor. There isn't a lot backing what people are saying. And more disturbingly, they find that the more viral a post goes, the less evidence there was to support what the people were saying. So it can often sound a lot like this.
Your lower back feels tight. Try this water bath from Timu. Hand and back. Your lower back is now released.
Okay, that's obviously extreme. But we see stuff all the time. My wife is a physical therapist. She's a wonderful physical therapist, and she'll see stuff online all the time and go, even from clinicians, and go, that person's never worked with someone in pain. Because that person wouldn't be able to do that exercise, that mobility drill, whatever it may be. And I interact with people and I try to be professional with them online because there's obviously such a misunderstanding of base concepts. One big one is the idea of non-specific pain. This is a very important concept, especially relevant to low back pain. Most of chronic low back pain is non-specific. I just heard a clinician the other day say, there's no such thing as non-specific pain. No, you don't understand the term. The term does not mean there isn't a cause of pain. The term refers to the fact that there is no significant structural damage or disease process responsible for the pain. That's what non-specific means. So people often don't understand that, and the research is there. This is from the World Health Organization. 90% of chronic low back pain is non-specific. So if it's not structural damage, it's not disease process, what is it? All pain has a cause, it just may not be structural or disease process related. So instead of telling you don't go online, I thought it'd be a better exercise to take a popular post and go, what would be the questions I would have if I'm taking in this information? So I'm not here to make fun of this individual or to be highly critical. I wanted to give a real world example of how I would look at information online, so hopefully you guys can do the same. So this was a very popular account, very popular post. So I'm gonna play the video for a moment, we'll break it down. So this gentleman, maybe, had a client who hung funny from a bar. He's an Olympic weightlifter, this is relevant, and he's been struggling with some nagging shoulder pain. So they did a screen and this person is able to diagnose because he is a clinician and said that this imbalance in his shoulder movement is the cause of his pain. All right, so what did they do? They used 3 interventions. One was some soft tissue related work to loosen up tight muscles. Another one was to give an activation drill for serratus anterior. And then he did an external rotation exercise to stabilize the shoulder joint. So there are 3 interventions we used. So then he did a post test, which is good to do. We'll do the post test in a second here. So after that one session, he could finally hang pain-free and without an awkward shift. So what do people think they need to do? Anytime my client has pain, I need to do soft tissue work, I need to activate the serratus anterior and do external rotation. Here's the questions you really should be asking. 1, how long did that last for? Did it last for a couple minutes, a couple hours, a couple days, a couple months, a couple years? How long did that pain-free life work? That's 1. 2, did all 3 interventions work the same? Could we have done 1 of them and 2 of them were kind of a waste of time? Because we're all challenged by time, right? How much time we have and how much time clients are gonna give to things. So if I don't need to do 3 and I only need to do 1 intervention, that's important to know, right? He's an Olympic weightlifter. Most of his time is spent putting weight overhead bilaterally. So if most of his time is putting weight bilaterally, why did his left shoulder just decide to become problematic? Did it wake up on a Tuesday and go, today I'm gonna move funny and create pain? Why did that happen? Right? I looked him up. He's a very accomplished Olympic weightlifter. He can put over 400 pounds overhead. Do you think his serratus anterior is not active? That he doesn't have shoulder stability? He's got to have it, right? But look what is the nature of his sport. Do you think his core is important? Do Do you think his hips are important? Do you think his lower body is important? Do you think his foot and ankle are important? So when we did that screen, we only, from the post, looked at the shoulder. I want to know more. I'd want to ask, were there any other screens or assessments done to eliminate that other things could be contributing to the shoulder issue? Because if you understand shoulders, you understand through fascial connections, the shoulder's connected to the core, the opposing hip, down to the foot and ankle, through these diagonal patterns. So when you saw them, when you have that weight overhead, core stability, hip, foot, ankle. We know in research on overhead throwing athletes, if they lack hip mobility, hip strength, core stability, they're more prone to have shoulder injuries because that shoulder gets overused. So do we know the shoulder was the problem, or was there something else? And plus, his sport is Olympic weightlifting. Hanging from a bar is nice, but how did he do when he was under load? So to be fair to this individual, I didn't ask him these questions because I was tired. I get tired a lot nowadays. So what often happens when I do engage with people, because I always try to keep it professional, because I'm like, oh, let's ask these questions. Two things usually happen. I either get blocked pretty fast, or I get this response. But it works for me. That's nice, but that's not really strong evidence. So when we're out there giving prescriptions that other people should do the same thing, we need more evidence than it worked for me, because I don't know exactly what that means, especially when all those questions remain unanswered. Because all these things have evidence to reduce pain. All these things can. I can give you research on any of these things to reduce pain levels. Should you do all of them? Well, you can't. But people want to know, what's the best one to do, right? What's the best one I should do? Well, here's the truth. What dictates the best outcome typically is your expectations of them. The more you believe something will work, the more likely it is to work. If you don't believe something was going to work, the less likely it is to work. Okay? It doesn't guarantee it's going to work, but it makes it more likely. So when you have that friend or that family member who goes, you got to do this, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life. Well, yeah, their expectations are, it's amazing, right? They're going to continue to feel that. But if you think it's the dumbest thing in the world, you probably won't get the same result. And yes, I am talking about placebo. Placebo's not a bad thing. Placebo isn't you're making it up. The medical community actually tries to harness placebo whenever possible. Because when you do actually activate placebo, you naturally get a release of opiates in your body that actually does reduce pain. Upwards of almost 50%. That's huge, right? Imagine you could reduce someone's pain just by believing what they were doing was better. That's why when people see all these testimonials online, all these people got results, well, I'm gonna get the same thing and this is great. That belief really helps them. Keep that 49% number in your head though for a second. So they even show in surgical interventions that placebo can be very, very powerful. So when people have knee osteoarthritis, that bone on bone that everyone complains about, and people go in, they're gonna get surgery, what they found is they did this horribly mean thing to people. People thought they were gonna get the surgery, but they said some of the people were gonna get the surgery, some people weren't, but they didn't know who was who. So everyone got an incision on their knee. So you couldn't tell who actually got the surgery and who didn't. So they found was reduced pain and reduced function was more correlated to if you believed you got the surgery than actually getting the surgery itself. Now these are kind of controversial studies because there's an ethical component to them, but they also have done the same thing with like spinal injections and get very similar results. So, and that doesn't guarantee you're going to get a result, but it does explain a lot of times why some people get such a benefit and other people do not. So if you get a good surgeon, which you guys, some of you that know me know I've had my fair share, they're gonna tell you, they may hope to reduce your pain. They may say it'd be great to reduce your pain, but they can't guarantee a reduction in pain because that's actually not the goal of surgery. The goal of surgery is to fix a structural problem. Whether or not you reduce your pain is a lot more complicated than that. And a good surgeon knows that. That's why the medical community does, generally, especially for chronic pain conditions, recommend non-pharmacological, because they know long-term pain medication actually makes pain worse, and non-surgical interventions. They know surgery doesn't typically help a lot of chronic pain. So the doctors are not against you guys, they're actually on your side. They want people to physically exercise. And this is a personal story for me. Those of you that have heard me talk many times have heard this story many times, so I'm sorry I have to tell this again. I almost didn't want to tell my story this year because I told my wife, I just don't think it connects with people. And she's like, no, you gotta tell it, you gotta tell it. So when I was 14, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive degenerative spinal disease. I already had significant back pain at 14 years old. Like, it took me 6 months when I was 14 years old to recover from a herniated disc situation. So most of my life, the past 35 years, I've been battling chronic pain. And 2012, it sort of came to a head. The disease kept progressing to the point in a 9-year period, I had 7 spinal surgeries. I had lost the ability to walk twice, the ability to use my right arm. And so that's kind of what my body kind of looks like. And what I learned are 2 big things. The physical pain can be extreme. Like, there's times in the hospital I would go in full body spasm because the pain was so intense that doctors would have to hold me down and give me medication. But the mental pain was much worse. Because doctors told me, I'm not sure you're going to be able to walk by yourself again. And I'm like, well, who am I going to be if I can't even walk? How am I going to be a coach? This is what I do. The fear of, like, what am I going to be able to do? This is going to be horrific. Like, all the worries about, my family dynamics and financial concerns all became very big. But what I also learned is that the world doesn't interact with people with chronic pain very well either. The number one question I would get is, what did you do? What did I do? Would you go to someone with cancer, go, what did you do? Would you go with someone with MS, what did you do? Placing blame on someone doesn't help the process at all, does it? It just makes them feel that much worse. And people didn't know, like, was I glass? Some people were afraid to, like, touch me, and other people were like, you look fine, you're walking. So I learned how, like, we really don't understand how to deal with people with pain. Because pain is not just physical. In fact, there's a huge mental and emotional component to it that, yes, we as fitness professionals can help people with. So I want to increase people's empathy. And empathy is not pity. Empathy is being able to look through other people's eyes and make a genuine connection with them. And I think a lot of times with chronic pain people, we pity them, but we don't have empathy. And so you're going to hear this person's name quite a bit, Dr. Ellen Langer. She's amazing. She's a world-famous social psychologist out of Harvard. She's been there for 40 years. She's done some big landmark studies on social psychology. She's considered the mother of Western mindfulness. So she says every behavior makes sense from the actor's point of view. So when you're like, have a client, they did something, like, I don't get why they did that. You're probably looking through your eyes, not theirs. Because it always makes sense from the actor's point of view. Because honestly, pain is complex. We don't have a cure for it. There's nothing, let me say that again, nothing that works 100% of the time for everyone. Even when they look at, Johns Hopkins put out this report, when doctors were evaluated for how accurately they diagnosed the cause of their patient's pain, they found 40 to 80% of the time they were wrong. Now, this is not to bash on doctors, because it's tough. Someone comes in with pain, wants an answer. Why do I hurt? Doctor looks at all the tests and all the screens and goes, I don't know. So I'm going to give you a diagnosis of some sort, because people get very upset. You're going to tell me nothing is wrong with me? Why do I hurt so bad? And I point this out because if doctors are wrong 40 to 80% of the time, how accurate are we on really knowing what's causing people's pain? Because there's big differences between acute and chronic pain. Acute is like, I run into this table and now my knee hurts, right? Something just happened and now I hurt. Well, in most cases, those issues are going to resolve themselves with minimal interventions in about a 3-month time period. I had a friend hurt his hamstring a little bit. He's like, oh, I think I need a massage now. I need chiropractic. I need dry needling. I'm like, you just need to chill. Is what you need to do. Because our reactions to these things actually dictate a lot of the recovery too. So 90% of the time in acute low back pain, it will resolve itself in that 3-month time period with minimal interventions. Basically, if you just don't make it worse, it'll get better. This even goes for herniated discs. In a 3-month time period, about 90% will resolve themselves. So when your client goes, oh, I herniated my disc 5, 15, 30 years ago and I have back pain, statistically speaking, unless they can show a progression of the problem from their doctor, it's not the cause of their pain. Yes, they're having pain, but that herniated disc is not. And this is a hard discussion to have with people, because people have already decided this is the cause of their pain. Right? So you have to do this gently, and you have to do this incrementally. And doctors are not the enemy. We forget we have to play the translation game, because there's a lot of telephone game going on with doctors to patients. Doctors know the research too. Doctors know that movement will generally help recovery and help reduce pain levels. So what they'll generally tell people is perform movement as tolerated. Now your client might say, well, can I go overhead and lift a big weight overhead, or can I do a heavy squat? And the doctor might say, well, that's probably not a good deal, don't do that. And then your client comes to you and goes, they said I shouldn't do anything. That's not what was said. Movement as tolerated is generally the recommendation, right? So we need to help people understand movement is still safe, generally speaking. We just don't want to overstress the area, especially in recovery. And not all pain is the same. We have neuropathic pain, which is like nerve-related pain, when you get that burning down the arm or the leg. We have nociceptive pain, which is kind of the traditional connective tissue, muscle strains, pulls, ligaments, tendons, things like that. We have neural circuit or nocioplastic pain, which is really interesting. We'll dive into that a little bit, which is your brain's misinterpreting what's going on and creating pain even though there's no structural damage. And this is actually very common in a lot of chronic conditions. There's inflammatory pain, which is a lot of times people with autoimmune diseases, things like rheumatoid arthritis. So all these are very different. And if you're lucky enough, like this guy is, you can have a mixture of these. So do you think that one exercise that you saw online is the solution to low back pain? Most people don't even know what type of pain they're dealing with. Yeah, we think, oh, this is the knee exercise to fix all knee pain. What are we doing? We also know that pain's on a scale, right? Some people, they only hurt when they do a very specific activity at a certain intensity or duration, right? Oh, if I run for an hour, then my knee bothers me, but I can run for 30 minutes. And then some people can barely function in their daily lives. So when people talk about pain, I want to know where on the scale are we talking? Are we talking about that very specific and not that big of a deal? Or are we talking like, I can't get through life very well? And this helps us do things like not bash on movement screens. And people love to bash on movement screens because they say, well, that doesn't tell you why people hurt. I bet you if you ask Gray or Lee, if movement screens tell you why people hurt, they'll say no. That's not the goal. No movement screens don't tell you why people hurt. They just predominantly tell you what not to do with people, right? So when a client does hurt, what should we be avoiding to do? And then secondarily, if we are good and we can correlate these movement screens together, we can be a little bit of a detective and go, I think we need to go in this direction with our training program. So it gives our training program direction, but it does not tell us why people hurt. I'll always be grateful to Gray Cook because years ago when I was going through some of my surgeries, he invited me down to Virginia. He worked with me one-on-one just on his own free time. And we worked for 2 days and he couldn't solve my pain, but he tried really hard. Right? It's complicated, it's not easy. But the internet will tell you it is. Just do these 3 exercises, do these 5 exercises. I saw one woman post about how she had gone through all these knee surgeries, and these were her favorite 10 knee exercises, but she had posted 10 different ones for like a week. So she had really like 60 different like knee exercises. If anyone tells you that they have the cure for pain, that's a red flag. Because if they did, they'd be the richest person on earth, and I'm not joking. Because chronic pain is the leading cause of disability worldwide, which has massive costs to healthcare systems and economics. So every government in the world would bring that person in if they had the solution to pain. So that's always a red flag if someone's like, I can solve it. So what can we do? Does strength training help pain? Well, generally we see in general strength training, we can see upwards about 52% reductions in pain, which is great, because if you're living at a level 6, you can go down to 3 or 8 to 4. That's awesome. But is it 100%? No, it is not. And general strength training gets better when we do add core stability to it. That's what the research says. It does improve its reduction in pain levels, but it's not 100%. Because again, people get this wrong all the time. All right, this drives me nuts. There's a lot of things that drive me nuts. I'm a little crazy. So, if I have a knee injury, I have knee pain, my brain understands that this is now dangerous. And from a survival standpoint, it goes, I don't want to continue to use this thing because this thing is damaged. And if this thing really gets damaged, if you think from an evolutionary perspective, I wouldn't be able to live very long. So I'm going to make everything weak so you don't use this thing. Because if you did make it weak, you could still work on it even though it was painful, right? But usually it becomes weak. So the strength inhibition theory is that the nervous system actually will make the muscles and the structures around the area that's in pain weak to protect it so you don't use it. So if I have a knee injury and someone goes, well, your quads are really weak, like, no kidding, really? Quads are connected to that knee. It's going to appear weak. But I can't retroactively look at you and go, before the injury, the quads were weak. Right? I don't know if that was the cause or if that's now the result of pain. So if you look at the research on knee pain, basically it says everything around the knee gets weak. Your glutes get weaker, your hamstrings get weaker, your quads get weaker, your core actually gets weaker. So all those people are like, you gotta work your VMO, you gotta work your quads more. Well, you also gotta work your hamstrings, you gotta work your glutes, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to isolate muscles. Same thing with rotator cuffs. Your rotator cuff is usually a victim, not the cause. How about stretching? Is stretching worth doing? Well, if it makes you feel better. Stretching can reduce pain upwards to around 60%. 60% is really good. It's not 100% though, is it? So it can help be a tool that we use, but what is our expectation for it? Even aerobic exercise can reduce our pain about almost 50%. That's why doctors will often tell people to go walking or do aquatics programs, things like that. 50% is good, it's just not 100%. Do you guys remember what I said placebo was? Around 49, 50%? So what we're seeing is these are all helpful, and we do believe there's physiological processes that do make us feel less pain, but we also don't know how much we just think what we're doing is good for us. And there is a little placebo kicking in too. It's not a bad thing, it's just we get overly confident of why we think something's working when we really don't know. My favorite though is the core stability one, because my wife and I have this discussion all the time. We have weird discussions at our house. She watches a lot of clinicians, and she can't believe the amount of clinicians that nowadays go, core stability doesn't help low back pain. There's no evidence of that. She's like, have you read any evidence? But it's crafty how people say it. If you say it, core stability has never been shown to fix low back pain. Oh, that's crafty, because that's true. It does not fix low back pain. But if you look at the research, it can reduce back pain anywhere from 40 to 80%. What's the difference? There's lots of things. This particular meta-analysis, a study that looks at many other studies, found that when you did more unstable surface training or the bouncing, like kettlebells to bands and bouncing bars, you got on the lower end of pain reduction. When you did the non-sexy stuff that everybody likes to make fun of, bird dog, side planks, you got the higher end of the reduction. So there's definitely evidence, but it depends what you're expecting. Is it going to be the cure? Probably not. Can it help reduce? Probably. So core stability training has been shown to improve shoulder strength, because again, it's connected to your core. It's shown to reduce knee valgus, so that knee falling in. It's shown to improve overall movement efficiency. Seems like it's worth doing, doesn't it? Now I know some of you are like, but Josh, I do it and my clients don't get better. I'll explain why that is. Some of the things that could be a reason why. Because some of the problems with corrective exercise is that maybe we're just cueing the wrong stuff. So if you're doing a split squat or lunge, as my wife's showing here, and your knee's falling in and you're pulling out with a band, are you really fixing the problem? If the problem is foot stability, ankle mobility, hip stability, core stability? Not really, are we? We're not fixing the problem. We're just addressing that in a movement sense. There's another big thing. So in the late 90s, it was very big. It was a landmark. We got told there's new research coming out of Australia that said if you train the transversus abdominis, you'll fix low back pain. And so what do we all do? We all train the transversus abdominis of all our clients. Well, two things I noticed very quickly. One is my clients didn't get better, and two, they hated it. So I went and did a crazy thing. I went and read the research myself. And when I read it, I found this quote. Read this quote for a second. Show me this quote where it says the transversus abdominis was weak. It doesn't, does it? It says it turned on at the wrong time. It's a motor control issue. It's not a strength issue. So many times we try to fix motor control issues with strength solutions, and we don't get very far. Because it is true, if you draw in your belly button, you get more transversus abdominis activity. But guess what? The synergistic core muscles actually reduce their activity. So you actually get less spinal stability, even though you do get more transversus abdominis activity. So what one muscle does is not as important as what they all do. Because when you brace, you get less transversus abdominis activity, but you get more synergy of the other core muscles. So can we please stop blaming single muscles for things? Can we stop trying to isolate everything? Not only is it inefficient, it's just ineffective. Your feet are connected to your core. Ankle dorsiflexion exercises actually activate your core. This doesn't make sense unless you understand myofascial slings. So oftentimes we're just cueing the wrong things. How many times do you cue people's feet in their core exercises? It's actually really important. So your lats work synergistically with our other core muscles. Your lats are primarily core stabilizers. Yes, they give us that nice V shape, but they're mainly to be a core stabilizer, and they control what's happening from the upper body to the lower body. They're big in spinal stability, especially as we walk and we run. So are we doing things to sort of bridge that gap and make it more synergistic with our core training? Because if we look at Robin at the top, we see that curved lumbar spine. It's hard to see, but she's got some of that wing and that scapula too. Now, some people might get on there and they might like be sitting there, like no one's ever done this. Like they sit there and try to manipulate their client's pelvis back and forth a million times. Don't get very far. All she has to do is push to the balls of her feet, grab the ground appropriately. Her spine is in neutral and her shoulder blades are fixed. So I didn't have to tell her to activate her lat, activate this muscle, activate this muscle. I had her push to the balls of her feet and engage with the ground appropriately. So my wife was volunteering to show a bad bird dog. Bird dogs and dead bugs and a lot of core exercises are just used wrong. For example, the bodyweight versions are the most difficult because they require us to have what's known as reflexive stability. We have no feedback. We have to know how to stabilize ourselves as we're moving through space. So they're actually very, very advanced. Using load to help teach people how to stabilize is much easier. We'll do that in the hands-on later today. But you also have these long lever arms. This arm and leg are moving through this great range of motion, putting tons of load through that core. And if you don't know how to stabilize, of course you're gonna dip, you're gonna rotate, you're not gonna get a big benefit. Plus there's two segments moving, upper and lower body. How many times do we think about we can manipulate upper or lower or both? In my experience, it's easier to manipulate the lower body first and keep the upper body stable. We're gonna reduce that lever arm so they're not lifting their leg as high, and we might just use a glider. But you see how he's using his foot and his hands to create stability. He may not even be able to go full extension. He may just be able to go out a little bit and bring the foot in so we can use a range of motion. Over time he gets better, and we can add a little resistance to it before we get him to actually elevate his leg. We can manipulate the upper body. When we start to manipulate the upper body, we keep the lower body stable first. Okay, progression. So this is where we get into a lot of our isometric pulls or lateral drags. We'll do this in the hands-on a bit. But where you place the load changes everything. On the left, the load's in the right place, by his thighs. That's gonna allow him to engage that bracing, that core activation that we want. On the right, the weight's too high up. He's gonna get into shoulder and neck. So on the left is when the weight's too high. You see the arm turned in. He's getting more of this action. Well, that's not gonna give us the stability we want. If the weight's in the right position, see how it changes the movement. So the details matter. So a lot of times when people go, oh, I did core stability, it didn't work for me, I go, oh, let me see you teach some core stability exercises first. And then we'll reevaluate things. So does this all matter? I think so. Several years ago, Perform Better Chicago, it's a good plug. I was teaching some of these basic concepts, and then we had a group of women that were really excited to do the hands-on. I'm like, I gotta go over and talk to them. I said, what's going on, ladies? And one of them was like, oh, this is like getting lit up. She's like, I haven't been able to squat in literally over a decade because my knees hurt so much. In fact, now that I'm in my 60s, my doctor's toying with the idea of getting a knee replacement. I said, oh, that's terrible. She goes, no, it's not, because watch this. So let's watch this. Knee replacement.
First time ever.
This stuff works. Now, is it gonna work for everyone? No, but it works for a lot of people. And works is a relative thing. It might be making you down from an 8 to 5 pain level in your knees. It might be allowing you to introduce squatting to someone or a movement pattern to someone. Is she fixed now? No, she's not fixed. There's a lot of work we gotta do, but she now has less fear. And that's a big part of the whole thing. So we're focusing on patterns, not muscles. And one of those big patterns are diagonal patterns. So you guys already got exposed to them before. One big one is this spiral line, and they work, whoops, on both sides of our body. So these are simultaneously going the front and back. Maybe if I can get the thing to work. Maybe. There we go. So your right shoulder is connected to your core, to your left hip, down your lower leg. So if your right shoulder hurts, you can look at your shoulder, but you also better look at what? Your core, your opposite hip, left ankle, left foot. And as well as your neck, because your neck has a lot of influence as well. We already know that diagonals are very powerful from the idea of proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, say that fast 10 times before lunch, or PNF. PNF has been around since the 1940s, that the neurophysical therapists knew that these diagonal patterns improve stability, mobility, strength, balance. But you can't get jacked off them, right? So it's not that we're not talking about muscles, we're just not talking about any one muscle. There's over 20 muscles involved in these systems. So yeah, we're training muscles, we're just doing it way more efficiently. So we need to get stopping and stuck on muscles, because these exercises come to life with things like, let's do, Lena's here doing a hip bridge with a lift and chop. So with the load, she's moving diagonally, but also her stance is bringing in some diagonal forces as well. So this is how we can introduce some of these patterns. She could reduce how far she's moving. Now, it's also not just about moving diagonally. It's about the intention of when you move diagonally. So we're gonna watch Coach Martin Adami here on the right. He's very intentional. He's breaking a bag apart. He's creating that tension, that brace in the lats. He's in that half kneeling position, versus this was someone I found online who's very popular. Do those look different? Now, you could say the gentleman on the left, he's going for power, right? Well, I see him just trying to lift with his back, his arms, and when we actually pause the video here, he's got a lot of tension in his upper body. So it's not just about moving diagonally, it's how we move diagonally. If we want power, we can do power. This is Noah Syndergaard, who's a professional baseball player. He was rehabbing at Cressy Sports Performance, his shoulder, and they get to higher level rehab, and his rehab looked like this. See the diagonal patterns? Now, if you don't understand diagonal patterns, this doesn't make sense for shoulder rehab, does it? But now you do. You understand that hip, that core. And he's not lifting with his arms, he's lifting with his hips, but transmitting force up to the body. Giant Rhodes here showing that, again, all rotational patterns are highlighting these spiral and diagonal lines. And they're not just in these patterns. If you just lift something off the ground, they're still working. But they explain so much about how the body performs. They improve our mobility work if we understand how to use diagonals. And we'll do this during the hands-on, if you guys want to go and experience some of this. And we can do upper or lower body diagonals. So typically we don't see a lot of lower body diagonal work. One of my first surgeries after I lost the ability to use my right leg was to get an anterior fusion. That's where they open you up from the front, take everything out, do the fusion, put it all back in and sew you up. It's about as much fun as it sounds. Well, one of the first things I did, because I had such core stability problems, because what, they cut the nerves, the muscles during the surgery, was I would lay on the table and the physical therapist would take my legs through these diagonal patterns to start restoring function. Now, hopefully you guys will never run into someone like me, because that's a nightmare. But we can do this even in a more functional position. So Corey here is going to use some of our myofascial integrated movement training. Watch this movement of his lower body. He's integrating diagonal patterns. And again, we'll go through this to the hands-on. Now he's also doing it in the upper body, but we can focus just on the lower body, right? We don't have to do the upper body too. Now, does this matter? I'm glad you guys asked. So there's a really interesting study that compared weight training to these diagonal patterns in upper body strength. So they tested elbow extension strength and knee extensor strength. So the weight training group did a bench press and a leg press. Makes sense, right? Well, elbow extension and knee extension. They compared it to manual resistance in these diagonal patterns. The PNF group got stronger in both than the weight training group. And they used a performance measure. So they used a volleyball throw and a vertical jump. The PNF group did better. Now, I'm not sitting here suggesting to you that you don't do weight training. I'm just saying these aren't now throw-ins. You just don't throw in a diagonal pattern. They should be more prioritized in a lot of our training. The funniest part, this study was done in 1986. So for 40 years, and there's other studies that have reproduced similar results, we've known this, but you can't go to the gym and get jacked. But they're incredibly powerful. What about foam rolling and saw all this self-myofascial release? Is that the thing we should do, right? I always tell people, if you feel better, then sure. But research shows that we'll probably see some improvements in mobility or flexibility. We might see some enhancement of recovery, but there's no consistent evidence in reductions of pain. And you'll understand why in a moment. So if you feel better doing it, great, do it. The question becomes how much time and when do you do it, right? Because we're all limited by time. Is it homework? Is it something people do before their workout or after their workout? That's the answer you gotta come up with. Because what we're finding out happens is we're actually not changing the tissue, we're changing the nervous system. So when your nervous system gets in more of that rest, digest, parasympathetic state, it makes sense that you have a little bit more mobility. But that doesn't necessarily lead to pain changes. Some people might, some people won't. So I always tell people, do you feel better doing it? If you do, let's do it. Let's figure out how much time we need to devote to it and where it goes. So the bigger question I have when people say, should I do all these things? And usually it's like a laundry list that goes out the door of things that they could do because they listened to a podcast, they saw a video, whatever it is. My biggest thing is your approach to it. Your approach to these things actually dictates the outcome more than these things themselves. Let's take an example. Breath work. Breath work, generally a good thing. But if I'm using breath work because I'm starting to feel my pain come on, and I'm like, oh my God, my pain's coming on, I better do my breathing exercises. Okay, I gotta do my breathing exercise. I gotta get rid of this pain. I don't know if I'm doing this right now because they told me that my 8th rib has to expand about 2 degrees out. I don't know if I'm doing this right, but oh my God, that pain's getting bad. Do you think that breath work's really gonna help? But a lot of people in pain take that same approach to everything. They're trying to solve their pain by doing these things. That increases the intensity to your brain that this is dangerous and will perpetuate pain. Which is funny because when you see a lot of people, they're having fun around a cold plunge, they're like, oh, I feel so much better. It's hard to tell if it was a cold plunge or the fact they were hanging out with friends. To be honest, no, it's serious. Because fear drives pain. I'm a kid of the 80s. I love Star Wars, some of you know that. So Yoda was right. Fear is the path to the dark side. You hear a lot in research about fear-pain cycle. The more fear you have, the more pain you'll experience. This is why marketing uses fear all the time to manipulate people. This is why social media platforms spend billions of dollars knowing how to make you emotional. Because they know you won't act rationally. So one of the things you need to do too is understand, does your client spend a lot of time on social media? Do they have a lot of things in their lives that stoke that fear in them? Christy Yuppie is an amazing chronic pain expert. She's a researcher. She's part of a landmark study that I'll share you guys in a couple of minutes. I want you to hear her explain it.
If you are responding with agitation or intensity because you're in the grocery checkout line and it's not moving fast enough and your nervous system dysregulates, that is feeding the pain-fear cycle the same way a pain-specific fear would activate the pain-fear cycle. There's no filtering system in your brain. If threat is the input, pain or sensation is the output, period.
Why does that happen? All pain is created in your brain. All pain is created in your brain. Doesn't mean you're making it up. I don't care if you just tear an ACL, herniated disc, break a bone. Your arm doesn't create pain, your brain does. Your brain takes input from the body and decides whether or not to create pain, and pain is often a sign of a danger signal. Something's wrong. But as you guys can see, many things can influence that pain signal. These are qualities that they say feed pain. They're all understandable things that people do, but if people do these habits, they will feed their pain more and more. Things like focusing on their pain all the time. They always are thinking about their pain, trying to fight against the pain, fearing the pain, fixing it obsessively, and ultimately getting frustrated. I recently worked with a coach. She had gone through a really tough situation where she had 5 spinal surgeries in a 2-year period. And she was pretty functional, but she says, I'm not obsessive about my pain. I'm like, really? So when you feel pain come on, what do you do? And she named off like 10 different things. I'm like, I think you're a little obsessive. We need to probably do less. Because even though you're trying to what? Fix the pain because you're fearful of it, and now you're actually increasing that pain-fear cycle. There's lots of things that cause our nervous system to get this perception of danger and make us more prone to experience pain. For example, they show people that grow up in low-income households generally are more prone to chronic pain because their nervous system very early on is exposed to a lot of chronic stress. People that grow up in very difficult households for a variety of reasons can get more prone because there's a lack of safety, which increases the brain sensitivity to danger. Trauma of any sort, whether you're young or older, can start to come out as physical pain and make your nervous system more sensitive. So we have to understand people, not injuries. That's actually probably more important. Because our brains actually structurally change under chronic stress, and chronic pain is chronic stress. Add chronic pain to challenging job, a challenging time at home, a challenging relationship, and we actually see a lot of problems, actually changes in the brain. So fear is marketed by everybody because fear is very money lucrative. Basically, our whole industry uses fear all the time to make lots and lots of money. Does this sound familiar to you guys?
These foods will make you die sooner. Processed meat.
Why eating tomatoes is dangerous.
Spinach, not healthy for you, full of oxalates.
Bread is never healthy. Processed wheat is inflammatory and damages your metabolism.
Fruit is just sugar, just like any other sugar. Don't think it's because it's natural sugars, it's better for you.
So our industry loves using fear all the time. And now I know some of you are going, but isn't it true, Josh? Let me address that in a moment. Because I had a coach the other week, like I was helping him with some stuff, and it was kind of random. It didn't have anything to do with our conversation. He goes, at least it's not the pharmaceutical industry. Like, that's a random comment, but okay. I'm like, what's your problem with the pharma? Well, they make so much money. They do make a lot of money. And it's fair to be skeptical of them. But if we're going to base our skepticism off how much money an industry makes, we better be very fearful of the health and wellness industry. That's going to be, this year, make 4 times what the pharmaceutical industry makes. So if we're going to have cynicism about one, we have to have more cynicism about the other, about the information that's being given. But what about, it's true though, Josh, it's true. We know fear does not change long-term behaviors. If you're talking about like a one-time off, it can help. But when you're talking about changing long-time behaviors, it usually leads to lack of motivation, lack of adherence to the program. Well, you know, people don't get the results that they want. So fear does not work. Let me try this. You guys need to make more money. If you don't make more money, you're not going to have a good life. Because actually, wealth is correlated to health. You guys are like, well, I'm trying to make more money. You need to do harder. You need to do more. Get more clients. I'm trying to get more clients. I don't care. You need to work hard to get more clients. How does that make you feel? Do you feel inspired? Our messaging is part of the problem. That's part of the problem. Because what we're dealing with is already very dysregulated nervous systems. This is an issue even with people in our industry. When you have a dysregulated nervous system and you have those structural changes in the brain, you have problems with emotional regulation, decision making. You have more what? You use more inappropriate coping mechanisms. There's people in our industry that will use exercise excessively and create other problems because they're trying to cope with a dysregulated nervous system. We just find it's okay because it's exercise. We have to learn how to help people understand how to regulate their nervous systems. And yes, you don't have to be a mental health professional to do it, and we could do it with exercise too. So this is why research says chronic pain needs a multifaceted approach. Exercise is a part of it, but we can't fully help people if it's the only thing we do. And yes, we can stay in our lane and help people at the same time. This is where mind-body becomes very important. And I didn't say mind and body, it's mind-body. Your brain and your body are constantly in communication with one another. It's called interoception. Your brain actually controls what's going on in your body. So if you guys actually felt all that was going on, it would overwhelm you. So mind-body is really, really important. For example, they found people that had social rejection, people that had just gone through a breakup, divorce, lost someone close to them. That heartache, right? They had a lower mood, they had depression. So what did they do? They gave them Tylenol. Why would you give people Tylenol? They're depressed. Well, they found that actually helped. It didn't change anything in their brain, it changed what they felt in their body. As their body felt better, so did their mood. I'm not saying give your clients Tylenol, I'm just saying be aware that there's a very close connection there. When they had 20-year-old males with acute low back pain, they had them do Tai Chi or stretching, they found better results with the Tai Chi. They had bigger reductions in pain, and more interestingly, they found less overactive muscle activity in those spastic muscles. It's not that Tai Chi is magical, but it's mind-body. And they find that people that score lower in what are called adverse childhood experience tests actually have less chronic pain. If you score higher, you have more. If you score lower, you have less. This is why doctors in the 1970s came up with the biopsychosocial model. Patients couldn't get better until they didn't just address the biological system, but psychological and social influencers too. They have to work together. In fact, one of the best predictors of how the outcome of a surgery is people's psychological well-being before surgery. So So this is from Dr. Ellen Langer, who we spoke about earlier. This is one of her landmark studies. She took 84 chambermaids, so women that clean hotel rooms, which is a physically demanding job. But they don't see it as exercise. So what she did is she split them into half. Half just kept doing their job, just did the regular thing, and the other half did their job, but they got education that what they were doing was actually physical exercise. After 4 weeks, they found no change in the group that did not get education, but they found positive changes in body weight, blood pressure, body mass index, and hip to waist ratios in the group that was told what they're doing was exercise. Now, I'm not telling you you can wish yourself to fitness. What I'm saying is, how many times do we think what we did wasn't good enough? And we should be doing more, right? I have a friend, a very good friend, he's a strength coach out in California. He just got into meditation recently. He knows I'm into meditation, so he's like, Josh, how long do you meditate for? I'm like, to be honest, I try like 10, 20 minutes a day. I was like, that's what I was trying to do. And I was feeling pretty good about it, but then I heard a podcast. Oh, that's the words that kill me. I heard a podcast and I heard that you have to do 40 minutes a day. I'm like, well, I'm sure 40 minutes is really helpful, but you don't have to do. So what did he just do? His 10, 20 minutes was no longer good. See what just happened? So our attitudes towards things are very, very important. This is also very interesting as well. They found a gene related to how fast you get fatigued. So they did a treadmill test with subjects, and then they tested people to see if they had the gene. So in the people that did have the gene, half of them they told them they did have the gene, half of them they told them they didn't. And the people that didn't have the gene, they told half the group they did, but they didn't. What they found was a bigger predictor of how fast people fatigued as they did the treadmill test again was not whether you had the gene, but whether or not you believed you had the gene. How many times do we hear people go, it's my genes. It's my genes. If you believe that, you're going to be limiting yourself much more because it's probably not as impactful as you think. So when we're talking about chronic pain, we're talking about, we'll see in the pain science, a bottom-up and a top-down approach. Top-down is easy. My thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. Bottom-up is body sensations, how I think about using my body. We want to integrate both, and that's what mind-body practices actually do. So I want you to understand how much pain is in your brain. So Northwestern University did a fascinating study. They took people with acute low back pain, and what they were able to do is up to 85% accuracy predict who's going to get chronic low back pain. Not by MRIs of their spine, but MRIs of their brain. So we're seeing more and more how the brain is an issue with chronic pain than anything else. And this leads to a subject called predictive coding. We're going to try to do this together before lunch. Your brains don't react, they predict. I know that sounds weird because you feel like you're reacting. You're not, you're predicting. Your brain is the most metabolically costly organ in your body. So to mitigate some of that cost, your brain will predict things, right? And I'll give you an example that'll make a lot of sense. So it predicts based off every experience you've ever had in your life and information coming in from the body and the environment. Because your brain is stuck in this black box, right? Like you guys know, you don't see with your ears, you see with your brain. You hear with your ears, you don't hear with your ears, you see with your brain, or hear with your brain. They get sensory input and your brain decides what those things are. So how many people have ever been thirsty? Cool. You drink a glass of water and you feel less thirsty. What if I told you it takes about 20 to 30 minutes for your body to actually get hydrated? Why is it after you drink a glass of water you don't feel thirsty anymore? Your brain's learned a glass of water helps my hydration. So it predicts you'll need less hydration. Now, your brain sometimes makes the wrong prediction. You're out there throwing a football with a buddy and you overthrow them, right? Your brain will then try to make a correction of what you need to do to then fix it, right? That's what happens in a healthy brain. And unhealthy brains are impacted by chronic pain, chronic stress. They don't fix those predictions very well. And that leads to chronic pain. I'll explain more in a second, but because it's so complicated, I brought in some amazing experts to explain it very simply. That's predictive coding. If Dwight has a healthy brain, the next time Jim turns on his computer, he won't put out his arm and he won't have the bad taste in his mouth. But if he's in a cycle like chronic pain, chronic stress, he's going to keep putting out his arm and keep having that bad taste in his mouth. That's like the person that one time bent over, really hurt their back, and now their brain's predicting every time they bend over, they're going to hurt their back, even though there's no structural damage. Because the brain's trying to protect you. That's what it wants to do. It's creating pain to avoid the thing they think is dangerous. So how do we fix that, right? So we know things are bigger predictors than we think. We have to know people, not injuries. They did a massive study on workers and they found ergonomics, posture, didn't really correlate to chronic pain levels. You know what did? Job dissatisfaction. The more people didn't enjoy their job, the more pain they had. Same thing in relationships. If they were in unhealthy relationships, the more chronic pain they had. All right? Now, we know things like loneliness is a big factor nowadays. Loneliness has more of an impact on our bodies than smoking and chronic obesity does. And loneliness doesn't have to just be physically alone, it's just like you don't feel connected to people. That sounds weird, but I brought in a special guest again, my sunfish, to explain how this works.
When an aquarium in Japan temporarily closed for renovations in December, this sunfish stopped eating and started rubbing its body against the tank. The staff thought the fish had developed digestive issues or was infected by parasites, Japanese newspaper Mainichi Shimbun reported. But it turns out the answer was much simpler. It was lonely. The aquarium noted the animal's curious nature. It would swim up to the front of its tank whenever people came to visit. So the aquarium set up makeshift visitors by taping clothing and cutouts of faces to the tank. The aquarium says that the sunfish was back in good health the very next day.
You know the UK established an ambassador of loneliness because it's such an epidemic? So are there ways that we can socially engage with people? Are there ways that we can connect with people, especially when we're identifying and seeing they're struggling in life, right? We have to look at people, not physical issues. Because this is well documented in the literature, how impactful things like loneliness is. Someone who just lost a spouse, someone who just doesn't feel like they belong, things like that. People that are always giving to everyone else, they can feel a lot of this. Because lots of things feed chronic pain. Depression, anxiety, anger, and they're all understandable. Depression has like what they call a bidirectional relationship, meaning you can have depression and you get more pain, and you get pain and have more depression. They found in one study where they had over 1,100 people who were diagnosed with depression, 70% of them saw their general practitioner doctor, not for depression, but for physical pain. So we're dealing with people, not pain. Now this is really interesting, symptom appraisal. So there was a study done where they took people that had no pain and they created a pain response. That's fun, right? Now in half the group they told them this is good, this is healthy, like you'll actually get stronger from this. And those people, they actually had greater pain tolerance. The other half of the group, they said this is very, very dangerous. And they found they had a much lower pain tolerance. So how people relate to their pain symptoms plays a big part in how much pain they actually feel. Catastrophic thinking is a big thing that drives pain. People fight their pain like, oh, here it comes. It's never going to get better. Oh, man, I'm not going to be able to go to work tomorrow. Oh, my God, my significant other is going to get really pissed. I don't know. I can't be in bed all week. Like, they spiral very quickly, and that feeds more pain. Like, you ever heard a client, I got canceled because my knees are starting to hurt. I can see it's going to swell up, and then I won't be able to walk. Like, it happens all the time. Hypervigilance, always being on the lookout for things that can cause the pain. And that can lead to social isolation. I can't go out with friends because, I can't go out that late, then I don't get my sleep, and then I'll feel like crap tomorrow. Or I can't sit in that chair too long because then my back's gonna kill me and it's just not worth it. So people start to socially isolate. Perceived control. We all like a sense of control. All of us. Because our brains hate one thing really badly, it's uncertainty. And if you look at it, anxiety is uncertainty. Now, I love my dogs. Anybody knows me, I love my dogs probably too much. I give them tons of supplements because it gives me a sense of control that I'm helping them live longer. They may not, but it gives me a sense of control, right? And it happens to all of us in this industry so much because that's what biohacking is all about. Giving you a perceived sense of control. Do this, you'll live longer. Do this, you'll live happier. Do this, you'll make more money. Maybe. I know plenty of people that have done biohacking that died in their 50s and 40s. But it gives us a sense of control. And people with chronic pain don't feel like they have a sense of control. Now, I saw this article in Vox I thought was fascinating. They were interviewing a High Rocks competitor. He was very fit. He said, we can't control our careers, we can't control our relationships, but when you're training or when you're doing fitness, that is something, one of the rare things you can control. What's the issue here? This person can get very, very fit, but until he addresses some of these other issues, he'll never be truly healthy. Now, what that sense of control might be for him might be relevant to other things, but if we have people that are only focusing on the physical, we already said psychological and the social will play a big role and they'll catch up to him. I would bet it's not only a matter of time that this guy starts having chronic illnesses, chronic pains, because again, he's only focusing on one side. Because our neurons, we have basically everything we do is reinforced by behavior. We have neural pathways that dictate our behavior. If we feed very negative habits or negative thoughts, that becomes our default. Right? When people go, that's the way I am, I'm like, well, that's the way you are right now. Because we also know our brains are neuroplastic, they're changing all the time. So if we reinforce with more positive changes or more positive outcomes, we'll actually make that our default. So what are we gonna do? I don't think mind-body practices are optional anymore. In fitness, in physical therapy, there's tons of research that shows mind-body practices are actually as effective in some cases as physical therapy. That they can improve strength, stability, balance. We'll go over like a lot of them there because they work from the bottom up and the top down. They work in both aspects of a lot of chronic pain. So I wanted to show you guys an example of this. So last year at LA Perform Better, I asked for a gentleman or anyone to volunteer that had some low back discomfort. So this gentleman volunteered. He's nice because I've had low back pain for years. So I brought him up and he was very nice. We did a little prone hip extension test because a lot of people with pain will have reduced mobility. So we had him do a little test, see how he wanted to bend his knee first instead of extend his hip. So when we got actually his hip extended, that was where he was starting at. All right, that's where we're gonna start with. And we did a very simple myofascial integrated movement drill. If you're familiar with Tai Chi, it looks very Tai Chi-esque. It's similar, but we have some different ways we teach it. But I had him focus on just weight in his feet, how he's moving through his body, making his arms weightless and using our mobility balls as feedback, being aware of what his breath is rather than trying to control it. We did about 6 to 8 repetitions, right? Nothing crazy. So then we did a little retest with him as well. And he didn't have to be perfect either, which was really encouraging. So you don't have to be perfect. So let's retest. How does mobility do? We didn't do a mobility exercise, did we? We worked on that nervous system regulation. And he also said he had no pain. Now, is he fixed? No, he's not fixed. But the more he implements these things, the more consistent these will be. So these practices, actually, they're really cool. So we've been talking about chronic stress and chronic pain, calling chronic inflammation. You can actually check inflammation by blood tests. They actually see that these type of training actually reduces inflammation in the body, which then does what? Reduces catastrophizing, anxiety, depression, insomnia, improve things like kinesiophobia, which is a fear of movement, and overall mental well-being. This is what I want to touch on the little bit of time I have, because I've been sharing this study for a couple of years, and I don't think that people really get it. This is a very, very important study. This is from 2022 in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, which is like one of the preeminent journals out there. What they did is they took people with chronic pain for over 10 years, and they had them go 3 groups. One group did a placebo spinal injection. One group just kept doing what they were doing. And one group did pain reprocessing therapy. This is purely a cognitive practice, so no physical exercise. In 4 weeks, the pain reprocessing group, 66% of the people were pain-free or nearly pain-free. That's unheard of in pain science. And in fact, when they checked on them a year later, they were able to maintain most of these results. This tells you it's not just physical, does it? Most chronic conditions are what we know as nocioplastic or neural circuit. This does not mean they're making it up. The pain is real, it's just not caused by the reasons they think. This is when your brain starts to misinterpret and create pain. If your brain cannot distinguish between physical and emotional pain. It sounds crazy, but have you guys ever been really nervous or really stressed out? So really stressed out and your neck starts to hurt and you get a migraine? Or you get nervous and start sweating and your stomach starts to hurt? Right? You get embarrassed and you get all red. So we know that there's this interrelationship, but we never think about it when it comes to pain. Now, my favorite story is the menopausal symptoms one. I have to be careful with this. I'm walking on eggshells with this. I'm not saying menopausal symptoms are not real. They're very real. However, the intensity of them can vary on many things. Recently, my wife went back to Michigan to see some of her high school girlfriends, and one of them was like, they're getting that age, she's okay with me saying that, where they're talking about menopause a lot, and her friend's like, I'm gonna read every book there is on menopause, and I'm gonna listen to every podcast there is on menopause. What do you think she's doing to her nervous system? She's telling us it's dangerous, isn't it? So I said, I put money on her having really bad menopausal symptoms because of what she's doing to her nervous system. They did a study on over 220 people with chronic neck and low back pain. And they trained doctors to diagnose this nocioplastic neural circuit pain. And when they trained doctors how to do it, they found almost 90% of the people with chronic neck and back pain had this neural circuit issue. It was not structural, it was not disease related. It was not their back, it was not their neck. So, what can we learn from pain reprocessing therapy? We'll do some somatic tracking a little bit in our hands-on, so if you guys come, I'll teach you how to implement. It's like a 5-10 minute practice, easy to use with clients. It's exposure therapy. We need messages of safety. Mindfulness is part of it, but then reinforcing and showing our body that we're safe is very important. So it's not about getting rid of the pain, but realizing that if we have pain, we're still safe. That's very important. Outcome independence. I gotta go back to Yoda. Yoda said, do or do not, there is no try. That's outcome independence. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. You're not trying to change the outcome. You're just doing the practice, which is very hard for our very type A industry. I need a result. No, just do the practice. So these are, Dr. Howard Schumner is a chronic pain expert. He came up with these different ways of symptoms to look at when people are getting diagnosed for neural circuit pain. We're not going to diagnose people, but we can still look at these symptoms to see if our clients start fitting into a lot of them. One I thought that was really interesting is symptoms are worse after exercise activity. How many times your client does something and you're like, it's a very reasonable program, I was very gentle with them, but they still hurt? It's because subconsciously their brain's gonna go, this is dangerous, I can't do this, and it's gonna create danger and then therefore pain. So our conversation would be like, do not be surprised if some of your symptoms creep up. That your brain is learning that we're safe when we're doing exercise. Because how many times, and then that leads to, I gotta cancel, I can't come anymore, see my pain is worse, I can't do this exercise thing. But if we educate them that this is normal and you're still safe, then we can help them. Maybe it's giving them some resources. Maybe it's just gently explain to them what's happening. Because success is gonna look like the right. You're gonna have flare-ups, you're gonna have bad days. How we help people manage those is what dictates the success. So, one of the easiest things we can do is gather evidence. And I'm gonna let Dr. Langer actually explain to it, because she's done the research. It's a very simple concept, and it can really help people.
All right. So when you have, let's say, a chronic pain, you think the pain is going to stay the same or get worse. Nothing only moves in one direction. Sometimes it's a little better, sometimes it's a little worse. So we have people paying attention to when it's a little better, when it's a little worse, and then asking themselves the question, why? Well, several things happen when you do this. First, to see that it betters, you immediately feel better because you thought, I was in pain all the time, and no, there are times I get some relief. By trying to figure out why now and not before, in doing that search, you're noticing new things. This is the essence of mindfulness as we study. Actively noticing new things. When you do that, the neurons are firing, and many, many years of research has shown that it's literally and figuratively enlivening. And finally, that I believe you're much more likely to find a solution, a cure, remedy, treatment, whatever you want to call it, if you're looking for it.
So, really easy. Maybe you can have your client at 9, 12, and 5 o'clock at night, just report what their pain level's like. Are they really intense? Are they low? Are they 3? Are they 6? And then can they associate? Maybe it's higher, but they just had a fight with their boss, or they were just rushing around to get the kids. Just to reinforce them that your pain can fluctuate and doesn't always mean structural damage. It's a very easy thing you can do. Compassion. Oh, this is not a sexy topic. I just talked to strength coaches recently. Oh, good luck telling them the strength coaches about compassion. But there's so much research that shows that self-compassion reduces pain. Now, a lot of people don't like doing it because they think it's going to lower motivation, not hold people accountable. It's not what the research shows. The research shows that self-compassion increases motivation and adherence to programs. It also shows resilience in athletes. They have increased resilience to bad things that happen. So what's self-compassion like? It's not just getting yourself off the hook. It's if you had a friend going through the same thing, how would you talk to them? Because a lot of people are very critical of themselves. And self-criticism drives pain, lack of motivation, lack of adherence to programs. So listening how people are talking to themselves, having people journal when your pain is starting to increase, what are the things that you're starting to notice that you say to yourself? Because those are interventions we can help people with. Just getting them aware of what they're actually doing. Does this sound familiar? I can't tell you how many physical therapists, strength coaches, and fitness professionals I've consulted with chronic pain, and when we go over this, they basically start crying. Because they're so hard on themselves, and they haven't given themselves permission just to hurt, that all this emotion builds up, and they end up actually just crying. Big, strong guys just start bawling. because they just haven't allowed themselves to actually feel pain, emotional pain as well as physical pain, or be okay. They go, I gotta keep getting better, I gotta keep getting better, I gotta get better. It gets more complicated when that also comes from the outside world too. So you gotta watch for outside influencers as well. So easy things we can do to help people regulate their nervous system. What are your habits? Listen, how do people talk to themselves? What do they say about themselves? Right? How are their relationships in their lives? Are you aware of them? How they talk about going home, going to work, things of that nature. You can do very simple things like, hey, when you are feeling bad, go, you know what, this is difficult. That's self-compassion, acknowledging it's difficult. And that everyone's going through challenging times. It's a part of being human, but you're safe, right? A lot of people need to actually practice it. This is actually a practice we'll go over. You can do this, they do this in corporations and healthcare programs. They actually see improvements in performance in these jobs. Very simple things. You can have a playlist ready for your client's phone that they enjoy, that every time they play the playlist, just makes them smile a little bit. Just shifts them out of that, uh-oh, this is getting really bad, just for a moment. Or is there someone in your life that you can call or text when you're starting to feel this badness? Or simply just imagine if what you're feeling now was your friend, and how would you consult them? Very easy things. So exposure. Exposure is very important because we gotta help people understand these things are safe for them. Now, exposure therapy usually works like this, right? I have a fear of spiders. There's a cage of spiders across the room. I'm in the room with them. And gently over time, they bring the cage of spiders closer and closer. And then eventually maybe I have a spider on my arm, right? That's good exposure therapy. Fitness puts you in the cage immediately. Not so good. Somatic tracking is healthy exposure therapy. Not trying to change the sensations, but being okay with the sensations, which generally leads to lowering intensity and lower frequency. And we'll go through this during the hands-on. So you can't do it one time and go, I'm fixed. This is like saying, I went to the gym, now I'm fit. These are practices. You have to find what's reasonable for your client to do. Hey, can you do this 2-3 times a week for 10 minutes? It may not change everything, but it's going to slowly start to change. I worked with a coach who was having terrible problems with her chronic pain, even though she was very active. And she goes, all I did was practice every time I felt my sensations going, I'm safe, I'm safe. She just did it internally. She said after a week, I noticed my pain levels were down. It's a pretty simple thing just to go, I'm safe. Even if you don't 100% believe it, just saying it starts to fire off those neural circuits. So as we get close to wrapping up, this is Dr. Howard Schubner. And this is kind of the message I want you guys to really consider, because working with people with pain and living with pain is both difficult. Working with people with pains and aches can be very challenging. So you have to be up for the challenge a bit. But you gotta always remember this.
Do you have any final parting words you'd like to leave people with?
I think the main thing that I think about when working with folks is being kind. Is being kind and patient. And it's hard. You know, it's hard. A lot of the stuff they've been through is hard. And a lot of stuff they're going through is hard. And you know, certainly not to give up hope, because I've seen a lot of people find things that they keep trying different things, and they keep exposing themselves to different things. They find something that really makes a big difference for them, and they just need a little change. Sometimes you just need a little change to start a spiral that can lead to, you know, better stuff.
So after lunch, I'll be doing a Q&A. If you guys want to come and talk to me and ask me some questions, I do that. After that, we will be doing the hands-on where we'll be doing exercise. We'll be doing physical practices, but I'll also teach you a couple cognitive practices as well. We've been doing these awesome online masterclasses with Perform Better for the last couple of years. We're doing one upcoming at the end of the month on exercise prescription. So if you guys want to learn how to choose the right exercise, how you progress exercises, this is an online class. We do live sessions. You get all the recordings. They're all CEU approved, and we're giving you guys, if you use the code DVRT through the weekend, a special discount on our earlier bird. You guys are welcome to email me with any questions, anything that comes up, and hopefully this gives you an idea that yes, corrective exercise plays a role in what we do, but corrective exercise is much bigger than maybe what we originally thought. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoy lunch.